Hello, everyone. Welcome and good morning. My name is Lori, and I'd like to introduce you this morning to a very special guest, Nephi Craig. Nephi lives and works in his ancestral territories on the White Mountain Apache tribe in northeastern Arizona. He wears many hats: professional culinary arts, indigenous food and agriculture, heirloom seed saving, social recovery, behavioral, mental health, nutrition, indigenous history, decolonization, indigenous resurgence, family culinary capacity building, Native American cuisine. I thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm really pleased and honored to be here presenting with you all, and thank you for your participation in this year's Young Farmers Conference at Stone Barns. It's very unique in that we're all zooming in from very far away, from coast to coast, and I'm assuming even internationally. The amount of people and interests that are here to share and continue the work that we've begun with land and food and people is very important. So I appreciate that you're here with me today. I like she said, I'm Nephi Craig, and I've been cooking professionally 22 years, and native foods is something that has really had a profound impact on my life. It's changed my how I live my life, how I approach parenting, how I approach work and business. As she mentioned, I also wear many different hats. I'm a relapse prevention specialist and a behavioral health technician in the work that I do. The combination of indigenous foodways, agriculture, foraging, and cooking, and the group dynamic aspect of all of that is what we zoom into in our work, because all of those behaviors that are attached to food and cooking and gathering and gardening and farming, those are all very, very action oriented. And I feel like those, if the statement healing is in the doing, then all of us here that are interested in agriculture, food and cooking, all of those behaviors attached to those, we're engaged in healing on a regular basis. So along this pathway, I've first started cooking in 1998, and going from kitchens all over the Southwest in Arizona, and then beginning to travel and go from coast to coast, studying and developing my interpretation of Native American food and cuisine. It's been this journey where I've made a lot of observations and seen not just the culinary industry change, but also a lot of other professions and fields that Native people are in. And the title today that maybe drew you to my session is Indigenous Food-ways, Resurgent Cultures, and supporting resurgent cultures, Resurgent Cultures and Recovery, I'm sorry. And that is very, very important to me, especially now. And I'm sure it's very important to you for choosing to come and be with us today during the session. Everything that's happening right now, even down
todo
to
lo
the
que está pasando aquí,
Skyping in.
incluso ustedes que están conectándose por... ¿Qué pasó?
There's a lot of
Todos
external
los que están
pressure
conectando.
because of the pandemic. And this pandemic that we're in, that we've been experiencing here in America for like the past 9-10 months, has produced a wide range of external stressors, and it's produced a lot of primary loss and secondary loss. And also loss in different forms that we couldn't have anticipated. So when we think of resurgent cultures, all of us collectively are a part of a new resurgent culture that was produced by the pandemic. And within this larger culture that we're bouncing back from, expressing our resiliency, there's also micro pockets, micro cultures like indigenous culture, farming culture, restaurant culture, academic culture, these different realms, they all need to be supported, and the experience of the practitioners need to be allowed to thrive and grow. I feel like a theme of this conference that we keep that is coming to the surface is a theme of self-care, and the theme of relationships, and reconnecting with not only ourselves but other people that are experiencing what we're experiencing. In some of my work, there's a sentiment or a saying that as long as the bonds that hold us together are stronger than those that'll tear us apart, all will be well. And that is true for what we're experiencing right now with the pandemic, food insecurity, access to food, access to care. A lot of these themes have forced us as a society and a culture to be more aware of public health, to be more aware of hygiene and sanitation. And it's caused us to be more aware of taking care of ourselves, whether we are complete believers of COVID-19 or not. It's still pushed all of us into a new reality that we're going to have to adapt to. And as we continue to move forward in this whole process, resurgent cultures, especially like for me, for example, in my community, on the White Mountain Apache tribe, and also the other tribe that I'm from on the Navajo Nation, we've been hit very, very hard by the coronavirus. And food insecurity and food access have been two major issues. And so us in marginalized communities are impacted really quickly and very dramatically. For me, in my own personal life, I've lost 4 close family members to COVID-19. And that's not even counting non-immediate family members. I'm talking my cousin brother, my cousin sister, and 2 of my aunts. And this is in Apache land and Navajo land. And there's been more people that I know in my community, people that I'm aware of, and people that have been family friends. So this is very real, and adapting to the changes that come from this time. I want to encourage you to use food and food choices as a way to be creative in managing the stressors that are coming our way. Our food choices right now are more critical than they've been in quite some time, at least in the public eye, because what we choose to eat impacts how we're boosting our immunity. So eating fresh ingredients, colorful greens, lots of antioxidants. Remember to keep your protein intake up so you can continue to rebuild neural pathways. And a lot of these ingredients that you're probably growing as farmers and that you're choosing to eat are in fact indigenous foods. And as you're working and learning to manage the landscape you're in and the territories you're in, I'd like to really encourage you to keep in mind that wherever you're farming on Indian land. Wherever you're cooking in indigenous territories. And these landscapes have histories. These landscapes have memories. And you all are very aware that growing certain crops that are good for that environment and that soil and that season is the most important thing to do. Creating healthy soil so that roots can thrive. Take that same concept of choosing different cultivars so it releases all of the nutrients back into the soil. Take that same analogy or turn it into an analogy, and what are you putting into your own body, your own mind, and how are you nurturing your own spirit? And because ultimately, if we're going to regenerate a new self that's post-pandemic, if we're going to transfer our work into a more into a different reality after we get the coronavirus under control or becomes manageable, what are we going to take into that? Is this moment in time, this very historical moment in time that we're living through together, is it going to be a trend? Is public health just trendy right now? Is self-care just trendy right now? Is food choices trendy? Or are we going to carry that in as a part of our life on a continual basis? And I really think that it's very, very important that the lessons we learn right now, we take that into the future, whether it's how we manage our land, how we manage our teams. For the restaurant industry, for example, has been hit very, very hard. And it's caused a lot of these discussions about restaurant culture, how chefs, how we work and operate with our teams. It's caused us to re-examine more in a more focused way the hierarchical structure of a classical kitchen. It's even caused a lot of us as chefs to begin to have the conversation around mental health and the damages that kitchen culture can promote. So on the other side of the pandemic, the restaurant industry, the industry that I'm in, is also a resurgent culture. And what are we going to do with the experiences we share? Because the coronavirus pandemic, it's a traumatic experience. Whether you agree or not, it's a traumatic experience. It's causing so many stressors, so many unknowns, so many changes that we're all experiencing this together. And whatever thoughts or actions or changes you've made, or the loss you might have endured, those need to be the lessons that we weave a new narrative as we move into the future. And so being asked to come and present today, I feel the timing was very appropriate. And I'm really happy that you're here to share in this some of my sentiments and what I have to say and offer, because my perspective and what I'm talking about now is coming from true lived experience. I live and work on the White Mountain Apache tribe, and right now we're on a lockdown until the day after Christmas. Because the coronavirus pandemic the numbers are spiking in Arizona, and just the border town next to us, there's no lockdown. Majority of people aren't wearing masks. So there's two very different paradigms of this phenomenon or this public health crisis that are happening. And the indigenous perspective, our marginalized community on the reservation, we've taken it upon ourselves to, as a sovereign nation, to go into lockdown. And this is strictly for the protection of our own people. And the same thing is happening again on the Navajo Nation. So my experience is coming from being, I guess, being in the field, basically. On a regular basis, I deal with food and cooking, but I also deal with the recovery aspect and the mental health aspect of how myself as a practitioner can begin to educate myself to understand the traumas and the hurt that people are carrying. I mentioned just a few seconds ago that this worldwide traumatic event that we're experiencing, I want to encourage you to keep in mind that there is immense power in the struggle and the pain and the loss that we've experienced because of the pandemic. Keep a creative eye on how you can transform those experiences of loss and trauma, how you can transform that into power, because it is possible. That is actually where strength lies. So as I talk and bring some of this information to you, it's coming from a perspective of a person of color, of a father, of a community member, and someone that deals with, that deals with food and cooking on a life and death basis. As I'm talking about addiction, colonization, trying to create a path towards decoloniality in an ethical and professional way. These are really important topics and concepts because for many generations and a lot of time in America, Native voices have not allowed to be heard. Stories and narratives have been written about us, but never, very rarely throughout history were we able to communicate directly and represent who we are. So I would really like to encourage you, since no matter where you are in North America, South America, anywhere in the Americas, no matter wherever you're doing your work from, you're on Indian land. So that being true, we're one of the, at least on this continent, we're one of the most resilient, resurgent, and rebellious cultures that go in line with our landscapes. So moving forward, I encourage you to educate yourself about this indigenous struggle, this BIPOC struggle, this struggle that we carry in our hearts and live with every single day, because Black, Indigenous people of color are experiencing the same ills and fallout effect of colonialism. And this is the knot that we are unraveling collectively through the work that we do. When you interact with seeds and soil and food and cooking, you are at the cusp, you are at a nexus of time and place. You are on the brink, and you are dealing with nature and science and love and compassion all at once. So since you're already in that mode as a farmer or cook or professional, I encourage you to take that sentiment and that compassion that you have for the landscape, food, and people, and transfer that energy into research, into the research and study and acceptance of our Indigenous experience, of the BIPOC experience, because no, we cannot heal collectively if there's going to be historical trauma deniers. We heal collectively in our own communities. Remember, I'm not talking about a quick fix for the whole country. I'm talking about you as an individual and your family and your team, because we can't heal in our own collective small universes if we don't accept the history of colonial violence and oppression that Black, Indigenous people have endured and still endure to this day. We have to have these difficult conversations and have a sense of ethical delivery in how we're speaking on these things, because it's through the pain that we learn to manage the pain. It's not from running from it. It's not from avoiding the conversation. It's not from cultural erasure. It's not from cultural appropriation. It's not from any of those other damaging, shaming effects that maybe we've participated in directly or indirectly. It's through the difficult conversations and through the work that it becomes real, and you really begin to see that it's life and death for people that are deep in it. So along the way, I have some books that I want to share with you that are some of my favorites. I've got tons and tons of books, but I wanted to just kind of show a couple that I really like. This one is for Indigenous eyes only, and you can see it was edited Wilson and Yellowbird. This is a really cool one. It's kind of like a workbook. This one is a little bit older, but it still has very, very valid information in there. I'm sure some of the viewers have seen this, but this is a great resource for our Indigenous experience. Here's another one, Peace, Power, and Righteousness, an Indigenous Manifesto by Dr. Taeke Alfred. This one kind of talks about the political legal framework of Indigenous resurgence and Indigenous reality. It comes from a very kind of legal and technical standpoint, but it really aims to empower so that we can deconstruct the colonial power systems if we're ever going to achieve that as Native peoples. Here's another one, Healing the Soul Wound. This is by Eduardo Durand, and it says trauma-informed counseling for Indigenous communities. And if you are entering the realm of self-care for yourself, you're going to come in contact with terms like trauma-informed care. And in the beginning, it's very exciting and it's very difficult. difficult emotionally, because there's a lot of emotional labor involved in trauma-informed care. And do your best not to use trauma-informed care like a buzzword, because it is serious. It is very, very difficult work, and we can all participate in it. And then kind of not a spin-off, but another evolution of the term, I feel, is now that we're going to begin to develop resilience for informed care, or solution informed care, after we walk through the threshold of learning what trauma informed care is. Basically meeting people where they're at and allowing people to be safe enough to heal. So healing the soul wound. This one is came out in quite a couple of years ago. Here's another one. This is In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Dr. Gabor Mate. Dr. Gabor Mate is a renowned psychologist, and he does a lot of work. And the reason I like this book and I'm sharing it is because it's about the realities of addiction. And remember, addiction is just the tip of the iceberg for a deeper root cause of trauma and violence and hurt and shame. And so the reason I'm presenting this one, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, is because Dr. Mate, he works in the downtown east side of Vancouver with a really, that has a high population of Indigenous people there in Vancouver. So it's really important, and there's a couple chapters that are just devoted to the Indigenous experience and recovery in this one as well. Then of course, you've probably seen this one, Letters to a Young Farmer. It has a collection of all the authors, and I was one of them that contributed to the book. I'm on page 89. Yeah, but I wrote this book. I wrote this, my little essay in there. I wrote it thinking about my community farmers. I wrote my piece of that. I contributed to that piece like I was talking to the Apache farmers in my community. And I really hope that I was able to reach both cooks and farmers and professionals in how that was delivered. Then I've got, here's another book by Dr. Alfred. This is a kind of a follow-up to Peace, Power, and Righteousness. This is Wasase. And it says Indigenous Pathways of Action and Freedom. And this has a more, it has a more indigenous, rebellious, and a more aggressive approach to decolonization and recovery. It's really great, gives a lot of great concepts. And Dr. Alfred does a lot of great articulation of his area in up in Canada. So, then another one here. This is Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States. This one I feel will be very, very important to understanding your own landscape wherever you're practicing from, whether it's cooking, whether it's farming, whether it's foraging. This book helps you to kind of understand our experience from how we see American history. We just passed Indigenous Foods Day, right? The master narrative is Thanksgiving, but we want to celebrate it now, or I'd like to encourage you to celebrate the holiday formerly known as Thanksgiving. Say it's Indigenous Foods Day, because the indigenous foods, the landscapes, they will offer us the true narrative of what happened throughout American history. So this one is by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, and it's a really great read. You know, do your best to try to pick up a copy and get, all of these actually should be in curriculums. And the final one I have to share is Indigenous Food Sovereignty in the United States. This one is Restoring Cultural Knowledge, Protecting Environments, and Regaining Health. And it's edited by Devon Mehesua and Elizabeth Hoover. So this is another great book, and I've got a chapter about my work written in here as well. This is about a collection of other practitioners across Native America and the work that they are engaged in. And so as you continue your journey, I want you to have an open mind and support and find ways to encourage other Black, Indigenous people of color to continue the work. And we can't just do that superficially by sharing a hashtag. We can't just do that superficially while it's trendy. We still have to talk about Black Lives Matter. We still have to talk about land back. We still have to talk about all of these issues that really came to the surface a few months ago, and they're kind of dying down in popularity. Bring them back and use them, because these issues are not going away. It's going to take us and our generation to really demystify the romance of rebellion and get in and do the work and make change happen. So every single new concept you encounter in your study to move forward, connect those concepts to behaviors. Otherwise, it's just intellectual fodder for keyboard rebellion and very little action. When you connect action and behaviors to the concepts you're learning, then that's when change begins to happen. Not on a huge societal level, but in you, and that's where it matters. So I want to thank you. I think I have a couple minutes for a little bit more. If there's one or two questions, I'm open to that. You want to, anyone have a question in the chat? Is there anything that stands out before we conclude? Avery, was there any questions you in the chat that might stand out to you want to ask real quick?
Many people are saying their appreciation for your work, and that they're really, really glad that you're here to share with them. One person asked a question on how can a non-Indigenous person respect and honor the Indigenous food and culture?
I think that's a very common question, and thank you for asking that. Take it upon yourselves to educate yourself. Pick up some of these books. These are just a small collection of the books that will give you insight, but also acknowledge and accept our truth and do some relationship building, and support the other practitioners that are out there. That's the best way.
And then we have another question that says, what part of your work is most rewarding?
Oh man, there's different dimensions of my work. The culinary side is creating new dishes and seeing people really love and enjoy them. The cultural side is where I begin to feel more complete by engaging with landscapes and food. And then the recovery and mental health aspect of what I do now as a clinician is also very rewarding, because I myself am a person in recovery. 9.5 years of continuous sobriety. I know the life and death struggle of what we're combining to try to get people to change their lives. So there's 3 different areas and more, but I'm just very grateful to be able to do this work. And it's appropriate right now in this point in time.
All right. There's a few more questions in the chat, and if there might be time later to answer those, but thank you so much, everyone, for enjoying this talk.
Everyone, thank you very much. I appreciate the comments, and I wish I had more time to engage and ask questions, but please send them to the moderators. And I believe Stone Barns always puts out a contact list. My email will be in there, and I do live cooking demos on Instagram every Wednesday. I call it my Wu-Tang Wednesday, and I just did one last night. So check me out on Instagram, just Nephi_Craig. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Wash your hands. Mask up. Be safe.